and welcome to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and for this episode, I'm joined by guitarist Steve Banks. Steve's new album is called Emboldened, and Steve is currently out touring this album, appearing in all sorts of the usual venues around the UK. What you're listening to right now is Just Listen, which is taken from Emboldened. I hope you enjoy listening to my conversation with Steve. So, hi, Steve Banks. Welcome to the latest episode of Harmonious World, and I'm delighted to be talking to you about your new album, Emboldened.
Oh, thanks, Hilary. Thanks so much for inviting me. It's brilliant to be part of this.
Great stuff. Thank you. I don't know if you know very much about the podcast, but it started as many of these things did in the pandemic, because I just wanted to. I wanted to do something different, but I also wanted to help musicians who, obviously, many of them, their business just fell off a cliff.
Right.
And I've interviewed some amazing people. I've been really, really lucky. And what I've found most recently is, some of those interviews during lockdown were great. They were really, really interesting. But what I've found since is that actually there's a huge amount of creativity in music that's come out of this terrible situation of the pandemic. And I think that's true of Emboldened. Is that right?
That's yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like many musicians, as soon as the pandemic hit, all of the performance work that I had in the diary just disappeared. And I was looking around at what we were all experiencing alongside COVID. At the same time, there was the Me Too movement was really very present in the media, as was BLM, and of course we were witnessing some particular characters in power, shall we say, and there was of course the climate emergency, and everything seemed to be sort of happening in this really focused and intense period of time, and I think it was frightening, and it was disheartening and destabilizing, and a really challenging time for so many people. And at the same time, it was this wonderful coming together of people, and this display of, I suppose, perhaps the best side of humanity when people are faced with adversity and they respond with kindness and support and charity and these wonderful things that were happening. And of course, when we watch the media, we tend to see all of the worst things that are happening. They don't, the news doesn't tend to talk about the good news and the wonderful things so much. But it was all around us, and we could see from the kind of small things that were happening at a local level to an international stage. People were responding together, and it was really inspiring, and so I decided to try to write some music that reflected that, and that's where Emboldened came about.
And so I guess it was written 2020 sort of into 21. When did you record it?
I composed it and managed to get some dates in. We managed to do a short tour at sort of end of 2021, and the project actually also included a collaboration with a visual artist, with an animator, and so at the beginning of 2022 we sort of premiered the whole project, where the animation was projected behind the band as we performed the music, and so the tour and the development of the music and the musicians meant that the music really evolved during that time, and so we went into the studio shortly after that and recorded it at Sansom Studios in Birmingham, which is a fantastic studio.
Right.
So yeah, so and I think it came out really well. I was really pleased with it, and I actually played it to Sam Slater, who I knew, who's the head of Stony Lane Records in Birmingham, and he said, well, this is great, we can release this on Stony Lane, but I was planning at that stage to release it as an EP, because the suite itself is about 25 minutes long. So and he said, well, let's release it, but it would need to be an album. So I composed some other music previous to Emboldened, which we'd played on a previous tour before lockdown. So we chose tunes from that selection and went back into the studio and recorded those, which now makes the whole album.
Okay, so which of the tracks on the album then are the suite?
So it's the first 4 tracks on the album. So I composed the music, and there's a kind of chronology to it, in trying to reflect the response of individuals and society to the adversity. So the first movement is fear, perhaps the first thing that people experience in amongst everything, and then second movement is belief, where people came together and thought, that there was something that we could do in response. And then there's unity, where people actually come together and make a difference and support one another. So and the last movement, unity, has 2 movements. There's the prologue and the main theme. So the first 4 tracks on the album, therefore, are from unity, from Emboldened, and then there's 3 remaining tracks after that.
Right. Yes. Okay. Which are Two Brothers, Just Listen, and Always for You and Forever Yours.
That's right.
That's right. You're a big softie.
That's right. Yeah.
Right.
You're not wrong.
Actually, at this point in the podcast, I would really like to play an extract from Belief, because I really like that track. And actually, at the end, I want to play a bit from the main bit of Unity. But tell me a bit about Belief, because it does feel, and it's interesting that I didn't realize that there was sort of a suite and then the extra bits, but there was a sense of development between those first 4 tracks, certainly. So Belief is kind of second track. So what does that sort of speak of for you?
Well, the fear was the first movement is based around the guitar, and so it felt as though it was a single voice, which was intended to reflect the sense of kind of loneliness that sometimes that we feel in that position of fear and isolation, as we all were, and some of us quite literally on our own, isolated during the pandemic. And the sort of theme of fear was more, it was kind of minor and slower, and and it had a sort of intensity to it. Belief, then there's a shift in tempo. It's much more of a shared dialogue between the different instruments, so that there's an amazing sax solo by Sam Crockett, piano solo from Rebecca Nash, and a guitar solo. So it really it's like people coming together more and there's more of a kind of exuberant feel and a more positive feel, perhaps, than the first movement.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, while we're talking about the people that were involved in that, they are a very, very special group of people, aren't they? The other musicians.
They really are. Yeah, I'm so lucky. I mean, they're just such fantastic people and really exceptional musicians. I mean, I was just thinking actually today, the one of the later tracks, Just Listen. I remember that when we recorded that, I remember in the studio we did 3 takes of that track, and afterwards I took the takes to I was listening to the takes and deciding which of the sax solos that that I was most into, that I'd like to include, and there was one that I was really into, and I liked all of them. They're all amazing. I mean, Sam was able to create this sort of he's got such a strong voice, such a strong identity, and he can sort of on every take he's so spontaneous. He can just create 3 separate, amazing, completely different in a way solos, And I was really into this one solo, and I played all 3 of them to Sam Slater, the guy at the label, and he was like, no, this one, this is the one. And I was like, really, I kind of like this one. And okay. Then I sent it to Sam Crockett to say, well, which one do you prefer? And he was also into the one that Sam Slater was into. And I said, well, I mean, it could have been any of them. They were all brilliant, So it's just an example of, it's like an embarrassment of riches, playing with these people. And Sam is just, I mean, he's a real sort of, I think, a real treasure of the jazz community in this country, and I would strongly recommend anyone that hasn't yet checked out his album How Weird, which I think won the Parliamentary Jazz Award maybe 2010 or something like that. It's a fantastic album. He's such an honest musician.
Yes.
His tone and his vocabulary, and he's got a real sense of tradition, but then he's really a real contemporary edge as well. He's just great.
Yeah, He is. He's an extraordinary sax player. I am biased because I really like Rebecca Nash. She's a wonderful person,
She
but
really
she's an extraordinary pianist. And I think
is.
she's almost sort of slipped under the radar in a way, in that she doesn't have the the respect of the jazz world that she deserves.
Yeah, well, maybe. I mean, she's released a couple of albums under her own name now, and the first one, Peaceful King, I think it was described by Downbeat as being at the vanguard of contemporary jazz or something amazing like that, which is obviously pretty much as high an accolade as you can get, really.
Yeah.
And similar outstanding reviews from both that album and also her most recent album, Redefining Element 78. Again, I'd just recommend everyone to check both of them out. She's a really individual voice. I mean, there's nobody releasing music like Bex.
No.
And she's so committed to the music. I mean, you can, if you watch her in performance, you can see how deeply inside the music, how much she listens, and how honest she is. What she plays is just what she hears, and it's just like an open door. It comes out unrestricted.
Yes.
It's so beautiful, and she's so supportive, because playing in that particular environment with a guitar and a piano, it's really wonderful to play with Bex, and we've played together not only in my band but in various other ensembles as well, and so we really know each other and how to exist, in that sort of collaborative way. And she's just amazing, and she's just the most lovely person.
Yeah, she is, isn't she? Don't tell her we said that, though. Obviously,
no, it's a secret. Yeah, nobody else can steal her from me, because
no, that's right. That's always the danger, isn't it?
Yeah, and also, I mean, just Henrik as well, Henrik Jensen, who I think maybe is less well known, perhaps. I mean, he is the nicest guy ever, and he sort of fell into my lap in a metaphorically. He moved into this area from London. I live in Bristol in the west of England, and he moved to Frome, which is close by, where there coincidentally is a whole sort of community of amazing musicians. And I otherwise perhaps I would never have known about him. And he's like no other bass player that I've ever played with. His time feel, he's got this propulsion, this sort of rhythmic identity that is just incredible to play with, and you can hear it throughout the whole album. And actually, while I was mixing the album, I kept asking the engineer to turn the bass up, because it adds so much to the music, and I wanted it to be really upfront, in the mix, and that was achieved.
Yes. One of the things that I think you do extraordinarily well is that it's often difficult when there is a guitar and a piano, because they're both that kind of harmonies going on, and they can sometimes not quite gel together effectively, but obviously yours do, both with you and Rebecca, but also with then guitar and bass, because you're the sort of upper extension of his range kind of thing. But that interplay really works really well, and I think those two things going on, let alone the sort of the rhythmic stuff with the drums, and then with the sax as well, it just all that interplay seems to work particularly well.
Well, it was really considered when I was composing the music. If you listen to a couple of the tunes in the suite, I mean, particularly Fear, the first movement, and Unity, the last movement, but really throughout the whole album, I composed with the other four musicians as individuals, but the instruments, so that so that the different lines would intertwine with one another and support one another, so it would really create this sort of harmonic and melodic tapestry, that that every instrument has an integral part to play. Interesting. Yeah, we I did a trio gig with Henrik and Sam at the Cheltenham Jazz Festival a couple of weeks ago, and I was looking at the different tunes, and most of it we couldn't play as trio because it needed the piano part, and I'd composed it specifically for quintet. So from a compositional point of view, it's very much considered so that everyone has their own part to play. But within improvisation as well, I mean, everybody listens so well to one another in the band, so which is really what it's all about, of course.
Yeah.
And so often as a, when if Sam is improvising, for example, that maybe Bex or I will drop out, or if Bex is playing, maybe I'll play as well, but I'll maybe just find a single line to play as a kind of counterpoint to Sam's improvisation and to create, so rather than another chordal voice, that kind of thing. It's just ways that you find, I suppose, as a jazz musician to coexist and support everybody, without getting in the way, really.
Yes. Yeah. And it is a that I think that's one of the things that I find people who are not who enjoy listening to music but perhaps aren't musical, aren't trained musically, they often can't conceive of how you can write music that where there's then an element of improvisation, and where the two change, and how that is constructed, created, and then improvised, and how those play together. And I think that your music really does that very, very, very well, in that you can't tell, which is really good.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, I've really studied composition quite deeply over the last few years. I'm really hugely inspired by musicians and composers who compose for larger ensembles, especially Maria Schneider and Nikki Isles, who's huge Nikki Isles fan. She's again another treasure, obviously in this country, and she's about to release her album as well, with her orchestra at the end of this year, which is really exciting. Kenny Wheeler, Vince Mendoza, those guys, and at the same time, Brazilian music as well, I find really inspiring. The melodies and the beautiful sort of obviously the rhythms and the way that the harmonies shift, and really the voice leading and everything in Brazilian music. So I try to, when I compose, the melody is so important, and I don't want to make complicated music. In response to what you're saying, I hope that people who are less familiar with jazz, or perhaps non-musicians, as you say, will still find the music that on this album accessible and uplifting, I hope, and in the melodies are, I hope that they're kind of earworms, and that they're whistleable and singable melodies. That's the kind of the music that I love, has that lyrical element to it. And I love songs. My wife Sarah is a vocalist, and I have an absolute ball playing in her band, and seeing the response that people have to music of that kind, with obviously with the benefit of lyrics. I mean, this is the as an instrumentalist, I have to do my best to put across what I'm trying to convey to you without words. And I obviously we have various tools to do that as musicians, but melody has to come first, and so I hope that people can connect to that, especially within this this collection of music.
Fantastic, thank you. Right, so tell me where people can hear you, how they can get hold of your stuff, where they can connect with you.
Well, we're going to be going on tour in June and July. We're playing at the Vortex in London, and we're playing at Spin Jazz in Oxford, the Spotted Dog in Birmingham, and we're back at St George's in Bristol. So that's coming up in the next few weeks. And then later in the year, I'm also going to be collaborating with a wonderful arranger and drummer and composer Jonathan Silk to arrange the music for jazz orchestra. So if you keep an eye on my website, we're going to be performing that at the end of this year and into next year as well, which is really exciting.
That is brilliant. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Well, thank you for your time. That is great. And I will point people in the direction of your website so that they can follow you and find out more about where you are. And I have about a third of my audience is in America, a third of them are in the UK, and then the other third are everywhere else.
Wow, fantastic.
So the everywhere else people will just have to go online and buy the music, and then the UK ones can check you out in person.
Yeah, please do come along. Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's bits and bobs in on YouTube and so on, but if you can get to see live music, of course, there's nothing like it. So
absolutely. And didn't we realize that, lockdown, everyone was kind of streaming stuff, and it was great, but it was nothing like.
Oh, I mean, just getting back in the room for the first time. I mean, as a musician and actually playing music for the first time with real people, it was we're so lucky. We're so lucky, Hilary, aren't we?
Aren't we just? It really, it's such a blessing to be able to do something where you just really connect with people in the room.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And to be releasing this album, for me, it's my first album as a band leader. It's to be able to be able to have that reach, to hopefully that people in America and around the world will be able to hear this music. It's really exciting. So thanks so much for having me involved in this, Hilary, and what a wonderful thing you're doing. I've been listening to some of the Harmonious World podcasts, and it's great. You're doing an amazing job and a fantastic service to the musical community. So
thank you
so much for getting me involved.
That's okay. And honestly, it is such a pleasure. I mean, I spoke to Maria Schneider during lockdown. She was one of my and that was just bizarre. Really to have that opportunity, because that's not somebody that I would ordinarily be able to speak to, and to have that was amazing. And some of the other people, I mean, these conversations are just a blessing. They really are.
Yeah. I mean, Maria's so generous. I think we're all really keen to be able to explain what we're doing, and hopefully encourage a few more people to listen to the music. So
absolutely.
Thanks so much.
Joining me for Harmonious World. That was my conversation with guitarist Steve Banks, and what you're listening to now is Unity, the main theme from the end of his suite. I love the Stony Lane Records concept, and it seems to really be an artist-led record label, which is really, really good. Often Often it's jazz, but it sort of goes wider than that and into contemporary classical and electronic and world music. And it's a really extraordinary thing. And they put gigs on at London's King's Place, which is right near King's Cross Station, if you ever get a chance to go there. So Stony Lane Records are a great thing, but the musicians on this particular album are amazing as well. So I hope you enjoyed listening to that conversation with guitarist Steve Banks. I really enjoy talking to people like Steve and actually all of my guests. I'm so lucky. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening. Please do subscribe if you feel like you enjoy this, or rate and review as well. Just support what we're doing here on Harmonious World. Have a great week. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and it's a great delight to bring this series of discussions with musicians and composers and writers and all sorts of people to you. Obviously, there's no point in having a podcast if people aren't listening, and I'm very grateful to my listeners for doing so. Thanks also to Joe English for composing and performing this new theme tune. So wherever you get your podcast, you can leave a review. You can share this with your friends and family, either as a link or on social media and that sort of thing. I'd be really grateful for that. Don't forget that you can subscribe now. There's a link wherever you get your podcasts. So have a great week, and please remember why I started this, which is just to try and make the world a little more harmonious. Thanks for listening to Harmonious World.